This tip of the week was a special request by one of my students. And by the way, if you hear any loud noises during the video, we're in the middle of a thunderstorm. And her question was, she was doing a pair of toe-up socks that had a tubular bind-off, and that's what I am doing here on this neckline. It is a tubular bind-off to match the tubular cast-on. And it's worked in the round. And she had a question about how to end a tubular bind-off in the round. So you can see I've almost worked to the end. Now when you set up a tubular bind-off in the round, and I know these stitches are teeny tiny and they're red, but we're going to do our best here. Notice that I have a purl stitch that is next on my needle, left needle, and I have a knit stitch here. And to do a tubular bind off, it really works best if you've got knit one, purl one. And this is how you should set it up. So if I were setting this up, I would have this be the first stitch. And to work the tubular bind off, and I have done videos on this before, I go in knitwise through the purl stitch, and I catch the knit stitch one loop. The stitch on the right, I catch it through the left loop. The knit stitch on the other side of that purl stitch, I catch through the right leg of the stitch, and I pull it through. Now this is important because this stitch that I'm catching over here was at the beginning of that row, and that is exactly the same way I started over here. Then I go back through the purl stitch purlwise, pull it tight, and I drop those two stitches from the needle. And then I repeat it over here. I go knitwise through the purl, I go through the left leg of the stitch on the right, hard to see, oh, there we go, and through the right leg of the knit stitch on the left that are on either side of that purl stitch, I pull it tight, and then I go purlwise through the purl stitch, and I drop those two off the needle. Now I'm left with, sorry, when I drop that off I kind of messed it up. I'm left with just two stitches here. I go through the purl stitch knitwise, I go through the left leg, then through the right leg, and then I purl here. Now, if you remember, this knit stitch here, since it's the last one, was the one that I started with, and I went through the left leg of that stitch, and here I've gone through the right leg of the stitch, so that knit stitch has been completely worked. I drop my needles out of here, and then I just kind of manipulate it. Now, yes, it's a little bigger, and what we need to do is kind of dress it up a little bit. The reason why it's a little bigger is that it was the last stitch, and those stitches tend to get a little pulled out of space. Now what I do to clean it up is I just go back through the knit stitch on the other side, on the wrong side, and I just kind of pull my yarn through. And what that does is it just neatens it up a little bit. And then I weave this yarn tail in the way I would weave in any yarn tail when I've got a column of knit stitches. And what I do is I just work my way through those stitches. But the important thing to remember when you're doing this tubular bind off in the round is that the first part of that stitch has already been worked when you began, so you don't need to work it again. It's just a matter of doing some cleanup. And you can see that's not too bad. It's a little bumpy, but this whole thing, because of my fine yarn, has been a little bumpy. And so let's look at it, and you can see I've got my nice neckline here with my tubular bind off.